Hey all, so Shelby Steele holds a PhD in English, an MA in sociology, and a BA in political science. He is also a fellow at the prestigious Hoover Institute at Stanford University. He has won many awards, written many books, and has a unique view of American culture today. Thank you, Dr. Steele, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so to get started here, before we chat a little bit about your upcoming documentary film, I'd like to ask you about Joe Biden's announcement that he would commit to nominate the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court to take Justice Ginsburg's position. Now, you've referred to this as possible election year race baiting, and I was wondering if you could expound on that a little bit.
Well, sure. That kind of statement, from a presidential candidate in this day and age, sort of breaks my heart. It's sad to hear that. What he's doing is he is using race as a means to power. Now, the problem with that is that's the same thing slave owners did. That's the same thing that supported Jim Crow segregation. Race is a means to power. Race is a justification for me taking power over you. And Biden saying, vote for me over Trump because I am more innocent of racism. I have no racism at all. He does. So it's very cynical and very counterproductive because you keep alive. Race is inherently, in and of itself, doesn't mean anything. It's just we assign it meaning when we want to use it to gain power, and that's what we use race for is to seize power. And it's an old and tragic American story.
It's very tragic, man. As a bit of a follow-up question to that, you've mentioned before about the role that bad faith identity, as you call it, plays in the African-American identity. Would you say that Joe Biden's commitment to nominate the first African-American woman is an attempt to play into that, possibly?
Absolutely. He's very cynically saying blacks really are feel that their history of victimization is their source of power today. They can claim that America is systemically racist, that they are still victims of racism, and that therefore they are entitled. And so you don't just say, "Well, I'm a victim." You say, "I am entitled to something because I am a victim." So it always works in that way. It works as a Black America, sadly, has come to feel that our greatest power in American life is our history of victimization. That's the power we wield so that we can get a presidential candidate to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court. That's how much power we have in our victimization as victims. And so he wants our vote. And in order to get that vote, he's got to do this. Well, as you can see, that's a cynical game. And the tragedy is that blacks are farther behind today than they were in the 50s. It's completely failed. It hasn't worked. It never will work because it doesn't look for what the real problems are that hold blacks down.
Can you expound a little bit on your view of what you believe is holding back African Americans?
I can. Again, it's dicey. People get very nervous when you start to talk about problems within the Black American character itself. But you think of it this way. The hardest thing in the world is to come into freedom when you have never experienced it. It's not a part. That struggle with freedom is not what we struggled with was oppression. racism, bigotry. Now we have freedom. And so it is confusing. We don't have a lot of experience with it. We are in a learning period. And so rather than fight through this period and really master freedom, find a way to live in it and thrive in it, we say, oh, no, our problem is racism. Racism is still here. That's really what our problem is. No, it's not. Racism is simply not our problem anymore. It's over with. But we are afraid of freedom, and so rather than face that real problem, we say it's racism.
That's fascinating.
And it's what holds us back. It's why we can't catch up. We can't close the gap with whites and others. Because we don't work on the real problem. We're still out here protesting racism when there isn't any racism to protest.
Man, that's fascinating. Man, there was a quote that I read of yours that I really liked. That you said race is completely objective. That it tells you nothing about a person's character, track record, or beliefs. And that kind of reminded me a little bit of Martin Luther King Jr. when he said that he wanted a nation where people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And it feels so much like today, like that's kind of being rolled back a little bit. That's not what's being focused on in politics and in this SCOTUS nomination commitment by Biden, and just in a lot of the protests that are going on, and it's just kind of sad to me, I think.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you. It is sad, and King, I think, just had it absolutely right. Title of my first book is "Content of Our Character," because he makes that race is nothing. And it should not be anything, should not tell you anything about a person. It shouldn't cost you anything. It shouldn't gain you anything. It's nothing. And that ought to be the goal that America's trying to achieve. Let race be what it is, which is nothing. It has no meaning. How would you achieve race? I can't. You can't achieve nothing. What would one do? So when people use it again, they're using it to gain power. They're saying, "I was victimized because of it, and therefore you owe me. I'm entitled." Well, what they're really concerned with, they want the entitlement. And they're just again using race as a devilish and dangerous way to keep getting. It breaks my heart to see somebody like a presidential candidate using race as a means to power after all that America has been through because of our insistence on using race as a means to power. Biden doesn't understand. That is the American original sin. That's it. It's not slavery. It's using race as a means to power. Well, we keep committing that sin and wonder why we're stuck, wonder why we can't get anywhere.
Oh, it's like repeating the same mistake, and then, and you're wondering why nothing changes,
Why nothing changes, yeah. And you say, well, I'm doing it for the good. I'm supporting affirmative action. Well, that's not the good. You're using race to what you are doing to the people who are stigmatized by affirmative action. A group of people who are trying to overcome a history of underdevelopment, and you put them in that position. Well, again, anytime you use race, you hurt people. You cause many, many more problems than you ever fix.
Man, I agree with you. I think that's very true. Now you have a new documentary film coming out this October titled "What Killed Michael Brown." Brown, of course, being the individual shot by a police officer in 2014 in the city of Ferguson. And kind of, I think that, when you read the media and kind of look back on it, it's kind of one of the triggers, I guess you could say, for a lot of the protests that has happened. It feels like a lot of it started in 2014, even though there was issues before. Now, when I watched the trailer, it was a very well-made trailer, by the way. I loved the jazz music and the kind of the noir feel to it, almost. Very well-made.
Thank you.
One of the lines that really stood out to me was when you said, "When truth becomes a lie, and when a lie becomes truth." And I really, that line resonated a lot with me, and I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more of what you mean by that in the film.
Sure. One of the most interesting things about the Michael Brown situation, again, it applies to George Floyd, is one of the more recent ones now in Louisville, Breonna, and these now seem to be recurring cultural events in America. That every several months or so we have another one. Mm-hmm. Almost always they blow up. Mm-hmm. Because they make what we call in the film the poetic truth, which is that blacks are suffering from systemic racism in every area of life. And so when you get a white cop who shoots and kills a black teenager, we say, well, of course, that's the norm. It's not the exception. That's the way America is for black people. And therefore we are entitled. It's always that entitlement that turns the truth into a lie. So we say that Michael Brown was a victim. Well, the truth is that Michael Brown went up to the police car, took his fist, slammed it into the man's face, bruised him from jaw to the top of his head, then began to fight with him for his gun, stepped back, ran away for a minute, turned around, charged him, the policeman, at full force. And Michael Brown is a giant. He's over 300 pounds, 6 something. A huge man, huge young man. Police shot him as to save his life, save his own life. He had no other option. Well, that's the truth. But even today, as we found, we've spent a lot of time in Ferguson talking. There are people who simply say that Michael Brown was a victim of white racism and that the police killed him and that everybody else is lying. And in other words, holding on to this precious victimization. This is the tragedy. You have a people now holding on to their victimization as their only means to power. And outraged at if you say, well, it's just simply not true. Michael Brown was not a victim. There's not a single shred of evidence to suggest that Michael Brown was in any way a victim of racism. Yet he is now an archetypal icon of racism for many young black Americans.
That's very true, and you kind of see, like you said, a lot of that stuff, it filters into a lot of the other cases, and stuff, where I've read cases of, somebody who lunged at a cop with a knife or whatever, and then, and then there's people going out and protesting, the next day, and stuff, and it just seems, it's, like you said, it's just kind of it's very topsy-turvy.
It's almost a hunger for victimization. Well, that's sad. That means that this is a people who are stuck and don't know how to move forward, and so move backward. I mean, I've always understood that if you can't move forward, you don't just stop and sit there. You move backwards.
That's
and so we're back in the days of Jim Crow segregation where blacks were lynched. Well, no, that was then. Now it's a different world. And we're afraid, we have difficulty making it. We're not prepared to thrive in that world. And so we we cling to victimization as our sort of only power in American life, and that's sad.
That is very sad. And I'm glad you mentioned the past a little bit, because it kind of leads into my next question. That in the trailer for the film, you kind of touch on a little bit of America's past with race issues, and how that has led to Michael Brown's death. What do you believe is the greatest disparity between that era and today?
Between the era of Michael Brown, or
of like Jim Crow, and then today, starting with Michael Brown.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, the difference. I grew up in. I'm not a young guy. I grew up in segregation. I know all about it. I grew up in Chicago on the South Side, and my family was very much involved in the civil rights movement and so forth, and so I vividly know what real segregation is like, and I'll tell you stories, but we'd be here all day. It is today is so. I simply, you could never have told me back then that we would be like we are, like America is today. America is. I am so proud of this society. I still have segregation flashbacks. I walk into a hotel lobby, and I remember that when I was a kid, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do any number of things. Today, I can do anything, go anywhere. I can. If I want to run for the presidency, I can run. If I'm good at it, maybe I'll even win. I can be the CEO of a major corporation. Anything is possible. That is the first time really in human history that a country has made the kind of moral evolutionary progress that America has made around race. I don't know anywhere else that's ever happened. That thoroughly. Americans do not want to be racist. They don't want to remember when they did, when they took it for granted as a way of life. So, but then of course now the burden is on me. I'm free. I'm responsible for myself. And that's scary. And so then I say, well, maybe racism is still here. And that's my problem. And if you'll just give me some more entitlements, then things will be better. That's not the way to go. That's a formula for moving backward, and that's what we're doing. I grew up in the 40s and the 50s. There was no black underclass. There simply wasn't one. Everybody worked. There were families, mothers, fathers. Everybody I knew had a father. Today, that's vanished. There's no fathers left. 80% of children are born out of wedlock. No families. Well, boy, how do you overcome that? And what we do instead of trying to deal with that is, again, say that this is a racist society and we need more entitlements.
Man, it's sad that...
And nobody pulls the cord. Nobody says, hey, let's look at the real problems. And let's look at the solutions that are available. Stop having so many children. Raise your children. Don't have children until you're educated enough to take care of them. Simple, common, everyday things. Not racism. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You're lucky. I remember when you did. Well, it's very difficult to talk this way openly in America today. Whites do it, they're going to be seen as racist. Blacks do it, they're going to be seen as Uncle Toms. And so we're frozen. The truth has a very difficult time getting out. I hope our little film, What Killed Michael Brown, is a little fearless, does try to get the truth out there. as it really is.
And I hope so too. You know, if what would you say, like, to the younger African Americans growing up, the protesters, the people in the universities who are being taught all of this stuff? Like, what would you say to them if you could talk to them directly?
I say, again, much of what I've just said. I think the difficult thing to do, the real challenge that we face, that you as a young black person coming of age in America today, the real challenge you face is not racism. It is freedom. Who are you? I say to black students when I talk to them, who are you? What do you like to do? What talents do you have? What contribution can you make? What's your grade point average? Are you really working hard in school, learning? And because you're going to have to compete with people who are. You have to get ready for this is a highly competitive society, rightly or wrong, or wrongly. That's what it is. Well, you have to prepare for that. You don't have to prepare as I did when I was young to live in a segregated society where I was limited in all sorts of ways. You don't have that problem. And your freedom is your problem. What to do with it? Who am I really? What do I want to do with my life? The beauty, one of the many beauties of American life, is that it lets you become who you are. Lets you become an individual. Not many societies have done that. Well, that's a gift. Understand, you've benefited from a gift. So I love to talk to black students and do every time I get a chance to. I do, because you are the future. You're going to show us how to. Your job is not to show us how to protest racism. We already did that. Your job is to show us how to live in freedom. How do we do that? That's what we need schooling and help and understanding in. That's a big one. That's what we really face.
No, that's very true. The whole situation of the modern situation with the protests and everything, it almost reminds me a little bit of I'm not of the viewpoint of Marxism, but there was a quote from Karl Marx that it did remind me of a little bit when he mentioned that revolutions are revisited once by tragedy and then by farce. And it reminded me a little bit.
Well, I'm going to remember that. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, and so that's
because you look at these protests now, and they really are farce. They're about nothing. They're just aimlessly disruptive. They don't have a point to make. They don't have a. Again, I grew up in the civil rights movement. To get online to march, you had to have a white shirt and a tie.
Wow.
Women had to be dressed in their Sunday dresses. You locked arms. You in numbers 4 by 4 by 4. It was almost military, and you went limp when the police attacked you. You never fought back. Because you were making a moral witness and standing in mute condemnation of segregation, of the evils of it, and so forth. Well, that protest worked.
It's very true.
People around the world said, "Oh my God, those people are they're trying to take us ahead." And it was a beautiful human moment. But again, today you just got running around lighting little bitty fires. You don't even there's not even a major threat of violence. I look at the death count; it's very small. It's teeny weeny. So it's like to me, the word I like to use for it is that it's mimicry. It mimics the great protest of the 60s. Those were real protests. these people are trying to steal the ennoblement of those great protests, and by protesting, and so they're mimics. They can't and never do articulate what they want. I can tell you in the civil rights era, there were many brilliant articulations of what we wanted. Many of King's speeches now are a part of American literature forevermore. Well, I don't see anything like that coming from this generation. I feel almost sorry for them to be that lost, to think that kind of fruitless, mindless anarchism is going to get you somewhere. There is in American life today goodwill. People want minorities to do well. They want blacks to finally overcome all that history of deprivation. They're not against black. They're not. That's gone. If anything, there's a desire to, whenever possible, lend a helping hand. It just breaks my heart to see young blacks do that, and I really argue with them ferociously. I'm unsparing. You can't continue to believe this. It's a lie. It's not true.
It's true, man. Well, that's very awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, to chat with me, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing your film when it comes out. And do you have a date for when that's going to be released in October?
October 16th.
October 16th. Okay.
Right.
And how will people be able to view it?
You could the website. The website is whatkilledmichaelbrown.com. And also Amazon.
Because it's nice to have somebody who has a hopeful view of the future. It's in short supply today, unfortunately.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah. Well, I greatly enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully with your next documentary, your next book, we can chat again.
I look forward to that.
Oh, awesome, man. Well,
busy.
Always, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. And well, you have a great rest of your day, Dr. Steele.
Well, thank you. You too.